Pete didn't leave a whole lot of stuff. I mean, Pete talked a lot about the baits that are going to be working here over the next couple of weeks. A lot like Pete, this is getting into my favorite time of year. This is the time of year where I really feel like Table Rock shines. It's the easiest time of year to catch fish on Table Rock by far. We catch numbers more than we do size a lot of times. The fish are done spawning. They're a lot more aggressive. They're a lot more apt to bite. So I'm going to talk about some of the things Pete talked about, but then I'm going to talk about some things that, given the current conditions, that people don't necessarily think about using on Table Rock that work. And some of the things I've been out playing with that I've been catching fish on that are fishing secrets, since that's the name of the seminar. I don't know if they're fishing secrets, but there's stuff that guys don't necessarily, or you don't hear guys talk about throwing a lot on Table Rock. We are post-spawn. Fish are moving out. There are still a group of fish that are going to move up and spawn. We always have this debate every year. The guides, the fishermen, everything else. Oh, I don't think they're done. I think they're done. Heck, they've been done for 6 months. Whatever. There's fish still moving up. There's fish that are still going to be spawning. So you can still catch some on beds if you like to sight fish. I don't sight fish. You can see I'm wearing glasses. I'm old. I'm blind as a bat. I gave up on it a few years ago. So I like to catch them when they're post spawn. My number one bait right now on Table Rock, and has been for, well, you can catch them 12 months out of the year, is a Keitech Swimbait. I use the 2.8 a lot with my clients because they're going to get a lot more bites. This time of year, a lot like Pete, I've been throwing it, the bigger ones a lot more, the 3.3s, the 3.8s, even up to the 4.8s, and I like to throw those where the fish are going to be positioned after they spawn. So where are they going to be? Most of them are going to move out on points. They're going to be on secondary points close to the spawning pockets. If you've got some timber on those spawning pockets, you're going to find a lot more fish hanging around isolated timber on secondary points or on main lake points, hanging around that timber. I'm going to start my day every day, a lot like Pete was talking about, with a topwater. Either the old school redfin is my favorite bait to throw this time of year, but you catch one fish on this after you've spent 6 weeks doctoring it to make it swim the right way, and it's done. So just like Pete, I've switched over to the surge shad. If you guys don't own this bait, and again, I'm not sponsored by Berkley. I got nothing to do with Berkley. Drew and I were commenting earlier, they've made this bait too good because this thing, straight out of the package, works like a charm. It's fairly cheap. I think they're under 10 bucks. And this is probably the best topwater bait that you can throw right now for post-spawn fish. It's called a Berkley Surge Shad. I like to use the jointed one. The solid one is a little bit harder to use. I just like the jointed one because I don't want to have to worry about having to work it, making sure it's running right and everything else. I take this out, I tie it on, I throw it, I catch fish. Yes, sir.
So, can you explain, I get asked, I own a tackle shop.
You do?
I do. What's the difference, or what's the situational difference for the jointed and then the straight?
From my perspective, there's really not a big situational difference. The straight one, I can reel a lot faster, and when the fish are a lot more aggressive and are chasing shad, like if I come up on a point, and it's acres of fish that are boiling on the water, the thing we all dream about every night, I will throw the straight one. I will throw the non-jointed one because I can cover water a lot faster. I can burn that one back in and it's going to stay on the top and it's going to work its way really quick. It has a tighter wobble and the fish are a lot more apt to hit it. On a normal day in, day out situation, when one breaks way over here where I can't reach him and then I move over towards him and then the one breaks right where I just was, this one's better because it seems to have a little bit more action that will draw those fish into it. And I'm sure you guys can hear, it's got really loud rattles in it, so it does draw them in. The only thing I don't like about this bait, the hooks are incredibly sharp, but they break. So I do change out my hooks on this. I take these off and I'll put must-have triple grips on because I like the way those hooks work. I like the way they hook up and they don't break. I've lost fish in tournaments on these because the hooks will break on these, just a side note. Once that bite's done, that's when I'm going to a swim bait. I'm usually throwing it on a Jewel Gem Shad 2.0 head. That's the smaller 1/8 of an ounce head. Matches up to the smaller baits really good. If I'm using the larger swim bait, I use the regular Jewel Gem Shad head. Matches up to the bigger one better, has a little bit bigger hook. The smaller swim baits, the 2.8 and the 3.3, if you use that bigger Gem Shad head, that larger hook has a tendency to kill some of the action on it. So if you're gonna throw the small one, get the 2.0 Gem Shad. If you're gonna throw the bigger one, use the regular Gem Shad head. From there, Pete touched on flukes a little bit. I am a freak when it comes to throwing a fluke. This is probably my favorite way to catch fish this time of year. I do not weight my fluke. This is the only color I throw, white pearl. I was surprised they had some. You're probably the only tackle store in town that does, and by the time I leave, you won't. But anyway, I throw this one weightless on a 4/0 Gamakatsu extra wide gap hook with a swivel somewhere between 12 to 18 inches in front of it just to kill line twist. I throw it on a 7.5 foot spinning rod, spooled up with 8-pound fluorocarbon. Just like Pete, I don't use a whole lot of braid on my spinning rods. I especially don't use a whole lot of braid when I'm throwing a fluke because I want that bait to sink. But I throw a fluke all the way through into June, into the middle of June, and a lot of guys do not, which is fine with me because I catch fish they're not gonna catch. It seems to me if I've got a situation, a lot like Pete said, where I've got a fish swatting at this and I throw a fluke in after it, I can catch that fish. A lot of times, if I've got fish that I can see shad on my electronics and they're down about 6 or 7 feet, but they're not chasing them, they're not pushing the shad to the surface, I can throw a fluke around those shad and I can draw strikes from those fish that you would normally get on a swim bait because you got to move it so fast, or a topwater that's buzzing over their head. Because when you're fishing this, I mean, it's simply you throw it out. Pete talked about watching it sink. Again, I'm old, my eyes don't work, so I can't see. On my spinning rod, I can cast it outside of this building. I can cast it about 60 yards, so I can't see where that fluke lands. I can't see how far it's going down. So I tend to count it down. It falls about 1 foot per second the way I've got it rigged up. So if I'm seeing fish on my graph down at 7 foot, I'll count 7 seconds. And then it's just twitch, twitch, and let it sink again. Twitch, twitch, and let it sink again. 9 out of 10 bites, you never feel it. So you've got to watch your line. 9 out of 10 times, I'll leave a little bit of slack in my line just straightens out. If you're not paying attention, you're never going to catch that fish unless you gut hook it. So that's the key when you're fishing a fluke. Twitch, twitch, let it sink, and watch your line as it's sinking, because your line will either dart out or it'll straighten out real quick and then it'll spit it right back out. But I fish a fluke a ton now through June. I'll fish it from 1 foot deep. I was catching fish on a wave break. If you guys have been to Baxter, they just put in a wave break this over the winter. Great big, they put a bunch of containers together and they got them floating out there in front of the dock. If you're fishing this weekend, it's loaded with Kentuckys, by the way. But it's over, on one end of it, it's over 50 foot of water. And we were catching fish on a fluke right next to that wave break. Just throwing it right parallel on that wave break and letting it sink down about 6-7 seconds and just twitching it and watching our line. And I mean, it was one after another. They were just coming out from underneath the wave break, and this was at, I don't know, 1:30, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. High sky, no wind, nothing. I like to fish that around docks. I'll fish it, like I said, anywhere from 1 foot deep, over 50, 60 foot of water if I'm around a dock or any sort of cover like that. Any questions on that?
What do you put that on? You said what?
I put it on, I throw it weightless, and I use a 4/0 hook, and then I'll put a swivel in front of it. And I'll usually fish it on a spinning rod. I have a 7.5 foot spinning rod that I use specifically for throwing a fluke.
Are you throwing that on a straight shank?
No, sir, I throw an extra wide gap hook, EWG. Yep, it's on an EWG. And I also, the swivel's not real important, but I like to use the smallest swivel I can get by with. I just don't want, I don't want something else out there that might distract the fish from my bait. So I use a very small swivel. I don't know the size, like a number 10 or something like that. But that's how I fish a fluke. From there, I know Pete touched on, shaky head, Ned rig, all that sort of stuff. All those things are going to start working here pretty quick. Actually, they're working right now. If you go fish gravel and gravel mixed with rock around spawning pockets, you're going to catch fish on a shaky head, on a Ned rig, or my favorite ever since we came out with it to fish this time of year is the Pee Wee football jig. If you guys haven't tried this little jig and the little trailer that we're making for it, that Jules making for it, it's a fantastic compact little bait that works really well this time of year through the summer. It's the right size, it matches the bulk of the crawdads that you'll find on Table Rock Lake. Most of our crawdads, though we do have the great big, you know, the Ozark, I don't know what they call them, Ozark monster craws, are like 6-9 inches long. Fish don't feed on those day in, day out. Fish feed on the smaller crawdads, and most of the crawdads they feed on, when you rig that bait up, it's going to be about 3 inches long, and that's what that mimics. And I'm fishing that anywhere from, you know, a foot deep out to 25-30 feet deep. Comes in a 3/16 all the way to a 7/16, so just match the size to what you're using it. I throw it on 12-pound fluorocarbon on a bait caster. Quick, easy, real easy to fish, and it catches a ton of fish on Table Rock. If you haven't tried the Pee Wee football jig, you should grab a couple of packs of them before you leave, because they're eating it now and they will eat it all summer long and then back into the fall as well. Another one, we touched a little bit on shaky head. I throw the Jewel squirrel head quite a bit. You'll notice I'm going to talk a lot about Jewel products. I've been sponsored by Jewel since they've been in business since '89, I think, and I've been with them since '93. And they're a great company. They make everything right over here in Arkansas. But the shaky head I prefer is the Jewel squirrel head. One thing I do want to touch on with shaky heads is I can't tell you the last time I threw a worm on a shaky head. Most guys, when they think of a shaky head, they think about putting a finesse worm on it and working along the bottom. I can tell you that I catch fish behind guys throwing a shaky head with that head with a variety of baits on it. I throw, my number one bait on it is the Zoom Ultra Vibe Speed Craw. And particularly in this color. Again, I was surprised you had this color. You won't have it after I leave.
Good secret.
Ah, well, it's the name of the deal, man. Almost, sort of secrets. Sort of secrets. It is watermelon candy, Ultra Vibe Speed Craw, and I do dye the pinchers orange. So, but this is the bait I throw 90% of the time when I'm throwing a shaky head anymore. I put this behind it. I'll throw a beaver behind it, like the Smalley beaver, and Magic Swirl is a good color. I throw the new VersaCraw that Jewel has out behind it. A smaller, more compact crawdad shaped bait. I always catch more fish than guys that are throwing a worm on their shaky head. So keep that in mind. You know, it's shaky head Ned rig season. Same deal with the Ned rig. Everybody's throwing the little TRDs and whatnot on it. I don't throw a lot of TRDs on my Ned rigs. Usually my Ned rig has got a little crawl on it of some sort. The new Pee Wee VersaCraw that Jewel has out is unbelievable on a Ned head. Matches up perfectly and looks like a little tiny crawdad scooting across the bottom. I'm throwing that on gravel. The fish are just now starting to show up on the main lake gravel points, especially the smallmouth. You were asking about targeting smallmouth, and Pete was telling you, those know-nothing gravel banks. Those are going to be key over probably the next 4 to 6 weeks. Finding the sweet spot. He called it the little rocky patches. We always, when my partner and I fish with all the time, we found the scritchy spot. Because you're dragging something along and all of a sudden it's like, man, that's kind of scritchy. That doesn't feel quite the same. And it's usually, it can be the size of this table or the size of that boat. But most of these gravel points, gravel pockets, gravel flats are going to have that little sweet spot, that little spot that's got some bigger rock mixed in it. And it doesn't have to be great big boulders. It can just be rocks the size of your fist mixed in there. There's a point at Baxter, and the story is there was an old man who lived up on the hill above the ramp there at, I think they call it Big Indian Ramp. You get to it from the other side of H, not the side coming from Lampy. That old man fished that point every day of his life after he retired. And he fished that point for, I guess, 25 years. And every day he would fish, he'd go home, he'd work in his garden. and he would grab rocks out of his garden and put them in a 5-gallon bucket every day. He'd put that 5-gallon bucket in his boat. He'd launch his boat the next morning. He'd drive out on that point, and it's flat, no, it's just gravel. And he would try to get right over top of the same spot. This was before anybody had GPS. He'd dump that bucket of rock. And when you find that one little spot where he's dumped those rocks for all those years, it's not really that little anymore, but you find that spot where he's dumped all those rocks, that's where all the smallmouth that are moving up on that point and moving back off of that point, that's where they want to be, and that's where all the crawdads are. But that's just one example of the kind of stuff you can find on Table Rock. Find that little sweet spot and then GPS it. Mark it on your GPS. Drop yourself a waypoint so you know exactly where that spot is. And that's something to think about when you're out there fishing. You know, you find that little sweet spot. You know, if you're fishing a derby, yeah, you probably don't want to go pull right up over top of it and see exactly what it is. But if you're just out there fishing for fun or maybe practicing for a tournament, go pull over top of that and waypoint that thing so you know exactly where it is. Put your casting ring or whatever around it if you've got that sort of technology on your boat, but then you know right where those fish are going to be when they move up and when they move back. Okay? Anybody got any questions about that? Because I've kind of covered a lot of the same stuff Pete's covered, just kind of put my twist on it. Yes, sir.
That Pee-wee VersaCrawl you said you put on your head, is that what you put on the Pee-wee football jig?
Yes, it's the same crawl that goes on the Pee-wee football jig. I'm not sure that they have them here yet because Jules having a hard time keeping up with the orders they've got coming in. I'm sure they'll have them, but it's a completely different crawl because it's called a VersaCrawl because you can fish it 7 different ways. You can fish it the way it comes out of the package, and then you can also take different appendages off or loosen the appendages so it has different motion, does different things in the water. But the Pee-wee VersaCrawl matches up with the net head perfect and looks like a little tiny crawdad coming through the water. So it's really cool. Other questions?
Eric,
Yes, sir.
on your Keitechs, favorite color and any difference, cloudy or sunny?
My favorite color by far with a Keitech is the 2 different Pro Blues they make. Okay, I like the Pro Blue Red when it's cloudy, and I like the Pro Blue Shiner when it's sunny. And the only difference between the two is the Pro Blue Shiner has a clear belly and has sparkle in it. It's sparkly, so it shows up a lot better. You know, it reflects the sunlight a lot better in the sun. That's the 2 go-to colors I throw. I do like this color here. They've got a bunch of these up there. At least they do right now until I get back up there. It is a Silver Flash Minnow, which is kind of the same thing as a Pro Blue, but rather than having the blue back to it, it has a green back to it. But anything that's a shag color, what I found over the last year, and I get some grief. You guys probably know I shoot a video every week, just like Pete does, and I'll get grief. The guys are saying, "You're talking about the same bait every week. You're talking about that same stupid Keitech every week." Well, yeah, I'm talking about it because it works, guys. It works. I guarantee if you gave me a pack of these and an 1/8 ounce head and put me out there with my boat and said, "It's the only thing you can fish with," I can catch fish on this on Table Rock 12 months out of the year. Whether I'm catching them a foot deep or like this winter when we were catching them 50, 60 feet deep, throwing this thing. This bait works year round on Table Rock. It's quickly become probably the best bait to throw on Table Rock. It is a Keitech Swing Impact Fat in a 2.8. By far. I mean, and all it has to be is a shag color. You know, I like the Pro Blue Red and the Pro Blue Shiner are my 2 favorites, but anything in a shag color is going to work. Okay? Other questions? Anything? Anything? Well, let's talk about some stupid stuff that nobody talks about but that works on Table Rock like right now. And you guys been down lately on the water? You guys fished the lake at all? You been back in the pockets? Anybody seen all the sawdust in the back of the pockets? Anybody thrown at it? Caught any fish on it? Anybody thrown one of these? Frog? Yeah, nobody throws a frog on Table Rock. Nobody does, so don't listen to a word I say. Nobody throws a frog on Table Rock. When the water comes up like it has right now, and while it is staying up like it is right now, it's going to take them a little while because beaver's high, bull shoals is high. It's going to take a little while for them to get this water to drop down. Anywhere you find sawdust in the back of a pocket, throw a frog on it. I've caught more big fish last year when the water was up and already this year by throwing a frog on it. And the only frog I throw is the black bronze eye frog from Spro. Simple, it's easy. I tied on 30-pound braid, medium heavy 7'4" rod, high speed retrieve. Throw it back in there, let it settle, pop, 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 pop. Hit every bit of sawdust you can find in the back of the pockets. You'll be shocked how big a fish, and it doesn't matter what the watercolor is. I catch just as many down by the dam as I do up the rivers doing this. They just want to get up underneath that shade, and this thing moving across over top of them, they can't resist it. I worked at Bass Pro for about 10 years, and we had a couple of guys that worked there that, well, they got fired, but anyway, they were troublemakers. And one day, they decided it'd be kind of cool to bring in some frogs and let them loose in the pond or in the aquariums. I have never seen fish react to anything they put in the aquariums as those fish reacted to a frog. These fish had probably not seen a frog their entire lives, and if they had, it was years before they were stuck in the dang pond and that pool or that aquarium. They tossed that frog in there, it started moving across the surface trying to get down to some rocks, and those fish went nuts. Every fish in that aquarium went nuts. Chasing those frogs around, finally got it pinned down to where they could get it, and they were all just like this, sitting over top of this frog on a rock, and he was holding his breath for his life. Then he couldn't hold his breath no more, and he was done. But anyway, they did that a couple of times. Fish eat frogs. We don't get the opportunity to throw them much on Table Rock, and just so you know, there are no bass in Taneycomo. We don't get the opportunity to throw them much on Table Rock. When you get the opportunity like we have right now, now's the time to just get the black ones. Keep it simple. Don't go crazy. You don't need a big 360 box with like 50, well, no, Drew probably says you need a big, yeah, you need every color in the rainbow, and you need 3 or 4 boxes of them. But get some frogs, take advantage of what we've got right now. And all the lakes are the same way. I mean, Stockton's been up for a while, when Palmy gets up. Anywhere you find that sawdust, and the beauty of a frog is you can throw, because you guys probably don't have a lot of experience with it, but you can throw this thing back into the trash and it's not gonna hang up. You've got to really, really try to hang this thing up. So you can be a horrible caster and still fish a frog. It helps if you can cast, but you can hang this thing back by a bush and everything else. It's very hard to hang one of these things up. They're very fun to fish. I will tell you this, when a fish hits it, wait a couple seconds before you set the hook, because he ain't got it. Because he will knock the crap out of it and you'll think, oh, it's like a spook, and you'll pull it away from every one of them. Wait a couple seconds. Slow your heart rate down. Slow your roll. Okay, he's got it. And let him take it down, wait till you feel it. You really have to wait till you feel it before you set the hook on a frog. But, I mean, they're not real expensive. Take advantage of what we got going on in Table Rock right now.
Is the belly black also?
Yes, yeah. I don't know that it matters. I'm a black buzzbait guy. It's the only color I throw is black. I'm a black frog guy. It's the only color I throw. I don't know that there's any logic behind it, but it's what I throw. You know, plenty of guys catch them on frog patterns, any other pattern, but this has it gives them a target that they can see very easily because of the contrast when they're looking up at it. That's my logic behind it. It's the same my logic with a buzzbait. They can see it better, they can hit it better, they're not going to miss it as many times on a solid black versus anything else. Other questions about a frog? Cool. Yes?
What do you call it sawdust? Is this all the pollen and the layer of...
No, when you get back, okay, yeah, you get back in there, you'll see little pockets where it's leaves, it's bits of wood, it looks like a mat, and it's brown, that's why we call it sawdust. but it's matted, and you'll see it primarily in the backs of creeks. You will see some, like if you go up the rivers, go up the Kings River right now, pay attention because it's kind of, there's a lot of shit floating, pardon my French, there's a lot of stuff floating. But you get back in even the main lake pockets and you'll see just sawdust back in these pockets where it's just trash is all it is, you know, and there may even be trash mixed into it, but we've always called it sawdust because that's what it looks like. Okay? It's just the trash floating. Yeah. I really don't. I've never thrown a popping frog. I don't own any of them. I imagine it would work the same. I don't know in the sawdust if the popping would, you know, because you're making a splash in front of it, I don't know if that would affect the bite or not. I've never thrown one. I've always just thrown these because they're so easy to throw back in there and they just glide across it, and it just, the coolest thing about doing it, and we almost caught it on video last year, but my partner / cameraman was a little bit asleep on the switch and wasn't paying attention. You can usually see the fish before he hits it. You can't visually see him, but you'll see a wave moving across the sawdust because these fish are only about this deep. There's not a lot of water there, and you'll actually see the sawdust moving towards the bait. And that's another thing, you got to keep yourself calm because you know he's going to hit it and you know you're going to jerk it away from him. But you got to wait till you feel that bite. You got to wait till you feel it before you set the hook. Other questions? Okay. Anybody throw the dark sleeper at all? Little swim bait that Megabass makes? This is a really cool little swim bait, especially this time of year when you're fishing stuff along the bottom. You guys have probably heard of scrubbing a swim bait or scrubbing a grub, where we throw it out, let it sink to the bottom and scrub it along the bottom. That's basically what this thing was made to do. And these things are dynamite. They're very hard to hang up. They're all the same size. No matter what weight you get, they're all that same size, which is about the size of a shad on table rock. These things are money. You don't, well, let me rephrase that. I was almost going to say you don't need to invest in a lot of them, but yes, you do. You need to buy a bunch of these. No, these things are great to fish on table rock, especially this time of year when these fish are moving to gravel. This is one of my favorite baits to throw out, let sink to the bottom, hold my boat 20 or 25 foot deep, cast it out there on that gravel, let it sink to the bottom, and then just slowly reel that thing on the bottom. Just as slow as I can move it. Just keeping it moving, keeping it moving. Smallmouth love these things.
What is it?
It's called a dark sleeper. Comes in a lot of different colors. The color I use is this one here. You can pass this around if you want to. It's kind of like a sexy shad. But it comes in a ton of different colors, and some of them are kind of crazy for what we do, but you know, it's a Japanese bait, so they're gonna make some absolutely wacko colors. That's my favorite color. That's the one I throw 90% of the time. Again, this is one of those oddball baits you don't hear a lot of guys talking about on table rock, but it works extremely well. It's not a crazy pattern. It's not something that's totally different, but it's something that works very well on table rock.
So that hook is actually poured inside of the...
Yes, it's actually inside the fin, but it does come out very quickly when you set the hook. Yeah, so it's relatively weedless too.
How long will it last?
It lasts quite a while. I've got some that are over a year old, yeah. And I've caught several fish on them, yes. Yeah, it's a very well-made bait. Just like anything from Megabass, you know, it's gonna be a high quality bait. It's not something that you're gonna catch 1 or 2 fish on and you're gonna have to throw in the trash. It lasts quite a while. They're a good bait.
Recover the hook point.
Yeah, it recovers real easy. Slides right back in there. So yeah, that's not a problem at all. Okay, any questions about that? Or if you have questions when it gets around to you, axe.
Can't pronounce the color name.
No, I can't either. I can't either. I can't pronounce any of the color names. That's better than I would have done. Better than they got one that's like Donko or something, that's like donkey or something. I don't know, but that's the color I throw most of the time. And I usually throw the 1/2 ounce, and I'll throw it on a bait caster on 10 or 12 pound fluorocarbon. You know, but they do make a lighter one if you're a spinning rod guy, and they make them up to 3/4 of an ounce. So I mean, you can fish this thing out 40, 50 foot deep if you're so inclined. It's a good bait. It's a lot like a spark shad, yes. It's a lot like a spark shad. I'm sorry?
Depth for 1/2 ounce or range?
I'm gonna probably throw that anywhere from 5 foot out to 25, even 30 foot deep. Other questions? Anything else? Anybody want to tell any other questions about anything else right now on Table Rock? Are we good? Everybody's okay? Everybody's tired of listening to me talk? Anybody know any good jokes? All right. If you guys ain't got anything, if you want to come up and talk to me, that's fine. I'll be around for a few minutes, but thanks. Appreciate your time and patience.